Hello and welcome to this week's Clarity Parents Chat. My name is Gerard Mijon with the Clarity Child Guidance Center, and we made a change to our scheduled program of webinars today to take some time and talk about the unprecedented winter storm that affected so many families, hospitals, businesses, and organizations in Texas last week. We thought it would be informative for our community to share what happened at Clarity Child Guidance Center during this incredibly challenging week. Now, if anyone has questions, I encourage you to ask them in the chat box at any time. My guest to speak about it is our own President and CEO, Jessica Knudsen. And Jessica Knudsen was named President and CEO of Clarity Child Guidance Center in February 2019. She joined Clarity from the Holy Hill Hospital, one of North Carolina's leading psychiatric and addiction treatment facilities for children and adults, where she acted in a dual role as the Chief Operating Officer and Director of Risk Management and Performance Improvement. And that is a decisive point, as she brought the experience she had gained from North Carolina, where this type of weather situation is not unusual. So Jessica, welcome.
Thank you, Gerard. Very happy to be here.
Well, first, could you explain to us what we do at Clarity in normal times, how we help families?
Sure, and normal is also pre-pandemic, so I would have kind of got a disaster layered by a pandemic. So Clarity is the only nonprofit in South Texas that is able to provide mental health services for kids ages 3 to 17, and we offer the full spectrum of care. We operate a 66-bed inpatient unit for those children that are in danger of harming themselves or others, a day hospital program where kids come 8 to 3:30 to get intensive programming, and then more traditional outpatient services such as talk therapy or meeting with the psychiatrist for medication management. And we do all that on one 8-acre campus right in the heart of the medical center here in San Antonio.
So that means we have patients on site 24 hours a day.
We do.
And people can come here 24 hours a day in normal time.
We do, yes.
So could you describe the situation on Monday morning last week at Clarity?
Sure. So, you mentioned I came from North Carolina, which we get winter weather most years, but it's usually a 24 to 48 hour event. So I was pretty well versed in how to get through a day or two of a kind of disaster scenario. This one was really unprecedented in the length of time that we were talking 5-6 days with those below freezing temperatures, and that really proved challenging. So we started planning the Friday before when we knew things were potentially going to take a turn for the worse, and we had some cold weather on the way, and that included identifying some staff to spend the night and just getting everybody ready. So when the weather hit on Sunday into Monday, we had enough folks on campus. We had 62 inpatients at that time, so nearly every bed was full. And we had a couple of kids in our crisis services area. So I think all total there were 64 kids physically here when that first band of winter weather hit. We were plugging along pretty well until about 9 a.m. on that Monday morning, Monday the 15th, and then the main backflow valve failed. Which basically dumped all the water from our main line into our parking lot and resulting us having to shut down the water. We consulted with several plumbing professionals, and basically they said we really couldn't do anything until the weather got above freezing, which meant we were going to be without water for the duration of the weather emergency.
So no water, 62 patients in the hospital. How many staff? About 30 maybe? Total?
Probably at that time we had about 30 staff on site. We had about 16 staff that called out that morning because of the inability to get to campus. So our Chief Operating Officer was working on a unit. Our Senior Director of Patient Services was working on a unit. Our Director of Admissions was in covering the admissions department. So a lot of the leadership team showed up on site. And then our Director of Nursing actually went out in a 4-wheel drive vehicle to pick up licensed staff. So we did have enough bodies on campus to take care of the kids.
So all hands on deck. Now, no water at Clarity meant also more than just not drinking water, of course, and flushing the toilets, challenges, but more than actually some heaters were not working, right?
Our two living units operate off of boiler heat, which means they're fed by the main water line. So yes, we were facing that coldest period of the event was that Monday and Tuesday. So we were facing that without working heat in those living units. We were fortunate that for that short period of time, because then something else happened later in the week, we maintained power and heat in some of our ancillary buildings. We've got 10 separate buildings across campus. So we were able to utilize some of our other spaces, such as our gym and some conference spaces, some educational spaces, so the kids could stay warm and we could keep them safe. So we were fortunate in that.
And that's a big deal when you think of the type of issues we have to work with, and some patients having to be one-on-one or have more difficult, complex needs, and so having to manage all that in the middle of that was quite a feat. Now, how did you mentioned some preparation, and how did you respond overall for the first measures? What were the first measures that were taken after this or during this first day? And can you explain a little more on the preparation that you did?
So a lot of what we talked about that Friday before was if we had a couple of things. Do you have enough supplies? So, looking at our emergency food supply and water supply. And typically for disaster preparation, you want to have about 96 hours on hand. So we just made sure we had that in our kitchen and ready to go. You want to make sure you have emergency ways to communicate. So making sure our emergency cell phones, if our phone lines went down, were operational and fully charged and had enough minutes and all of those details. Do we have enough salt on hand to salt for up to a week to make sure that staff were as safe as possible walking across campus? And then lastly, manpower. Do we have enough people that are able to come in and manage the units and manage the patients that we had here on campus?
And you mentioned that you have to have enough to function as a hospital. We have to have enough licensed people. So tell me, can you explain that for our audience who may not know what that means?
Sure. So all of our units are staffed with a licensed registered nurse. So those are the folks that are able to kind of supervise the milieu, the activities on the unit. They can take orders from the physician, they can do assessments. And so in order to operate, we need at least one licensed nurse, registered nurse on each unit. We also use licensed vocational nurses, but they cannot, what we call being a charge nurse on a unit. That has to be a registered nurse. So we're really in a position where we needed an RN and an LVN on each of those living units. Our mental health counselors are not licensed individuals, so we had a little more flexibility with those positions, and so we could pull in some of the leadership team. Gerard, you then stepped in to man the phones at the main desk. So we really did try to pull anybody and everybody that could serve in some more of those support roles. Our infection control nurse was helping to operate the kitchen because we had some kitchen call outs. So we had more flexibility in those roles, but those licensed registered nurses and LVNs were really key.
Right. Yeah. So now tell us about the second day, day 2, Tuesday.
So
things got even more interesting.
Things got more interesting. So we kind of made a plan for the water. We notified all the guardians. We figured out how to use our pool water to flush toilets. We found porta potties and got those ordered. So we had kind of gotten through that leg of the crisis. About 4:30 in the morning on Tuesday, we lost main power, which that brought down our internet and our phone system because we have a digital phone system. The repercussion for that, it was a lot. We lost heat in the remaining 8 buildings that aren't living units that don't house kids overnight. And then we lost internet and we lost our electronic medical record where we do a lot of our charting for our patients that are in-house. we do have a backup plan for that as part of our emergency preparedness plan, which involves charting on paper. So staff had to go to that plan. We're fortunate that our pharmacy staff were able to come in and assist with getting medications pulled and making sure we could continue to take care of the kids despite the challenging circumstances. Power stayed out till about, 4 a.m. the next morning. Came back on briefly and went out again and was fully restored late in the day on Wednesday. So we were included in those rolling blackouts that all of San Antonio experienced.
Now, I noticed on that day too, a lot more of the therapist and the medical team was here, right? Is it in response to that EHR failing too, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So prior to the power going out, our medical staff had the ability to see the patients via telehealth. They could log on to their internet at home and provide a virtual visit. When our internet went down, we had no ability to do that. So our medical director actually was able to get on site on Tuesday and remained here with us through the duration of the weather event to make sure that the kids were seen by a physician. And we had several of the members of the medical staff that were able to make it in. The other thing that was really important to us is, despite all this going on, the kids are here for treatment. So we wanted to make sure they continued to get group therapy, family sessions, discharge planning, all the things that we need to continue to do as part of our mission. And so the licensed therapist, we were able to make sure we had at least 4 or 5 licensed therapists here every day to make sure the kids were being taken care of. And then the other significant thing we did, which did have an impact across San Antonio, is Tuesday morning, we met as a leadership team and decided we couldn't admit any more patients. We couldn't in good faith bring anybody else into a environment where we didn't have functioning water and then with the power outage on top of that. And then we really evaluated who was safe to go home and facilitated discharging as many kids as possible. So over the course of the week, we started at 62. By the time we got to Friday, we were down to 25. So we did not take any new admissions from hospitals and just discharged as many kids home as possible.
Right. So it was, it took a while because parents were not always able to drive to come get their kids. Even the kids might have been able to be discharged at the time. And then we also had a core, some kids who just could not be discharged because it was not safe for them, right?
Correct.
So it's that tension. And you mentioned that the medical some staff were staying over. It's not they were staying in a nice hotel. Where did they stay? Where did they sleep?
So all said and done, we had about 20 staff, potentially a few more, 20 to 25 staff that stayed overnight at Clarity just to make sure we had enough folks here to take care of the kiddos.
Yeah.
I had an air mattress. Several of the leadership team that planned ahead had an air mattress, but if you didn't have one, we had some cots set up in our day hospital area with we had sheets and pillows and blankets, but yeah, not ideal. Several of our staff members, I think, are taller than the cots, and they figured out a way to make it work. So we had some very dedicated staff throughout the event.
Yeah, and no water, so meaning no shower, etc. Right?
Correct.
Yes. Now, how was the rest of the week? What happened after Tuesday?
So with the power going off and on, and then we talked to some additional plumbers. I was just trying anything to see if there was something we could do to get the water back on. Everyone advised we really couldn't do anything because the potential of the backflow failing was potentially related to a freeze in the pipe, and they thought if we forced it, we could have a significant break in the main water line. So by midweek, we determined that we were probably without water until probably Friday or Saturday at the earliest, when the weather prediction was warming up. So we continued to work on alternative hygiene options for the kids. We did manage to get porta potties delivered on Wednesday. The weather on Tuesday kept that from happening earlier. We found camping toilets that we could use on the units if the weather or the kids just couldn't get out to the porta potties. We did an assessment again of our food and water situation, because at that point we were already we're reaching the end of our 96-hour supply.
Right.
It did extend beyond 96 hours. We did get fairly low on water, and we reached out to some of our community partners. University Health, UHS, came through and donated 50 cases and got it to us that same day on Wednesday. So that was definitely enough. We really looked at the food situation, and that had a couple of complicating factors. No power, no water makes it very hard to do dishes. So that was definitely a challenge to keep the kitchen sanitized and hygienic. We also had tremendous amount of call outs in our kitchen area. So we had 1 or 2 folks that were just kind of holding that department together, including some volunteers from other departments. What our board very helpfully volunteered is they found companies that could cater some meals for us. So that Wednesday, both lunch and dinner, we had Lenny's Sub Shop and Black Tie Catering were able to bring meals on campus to allow us to shut down the kitchen, do a really good clean with our now ample bottled water supply, and get it in good shape, and give that kitchen staff a break so they could come back at it the next day.
Yeah.
So it stretched our food supply. It gave us a break, and we were able to do that for a few more meals throughout the week to stretch everything and give everybody some rest.
Yeah, because Lisa, our chef, was on deck. I mean, the first 3 days, I don't know how much she slept, but probably not a lot.
Not a lot, definitely not a lot. And then by the complicating factor is the weather kept getting bad. So, we reached out, and we would have these small windows to be able to get some additional resources. So, even if we wanted to find somebody to cater on Thursday, nobody was going to be driving in, and a lot of the restaurants were closed. So that was the continuing challenge. By Friday, things started to thaw out by midday. We determined it was safe to be able to transport the kids, get them in a vehicle by mid-morning, and fantastic community partners at the Winston School, which is a private school about 2 blocks behind us. They allowed us to use their gymnasium so that the kids could go over and get a shower. And again, by that point, we had about 30 kids in house on Friday morning, but they were all able to at least go get cleaned up, which was huge for all of us to be able to get that for them.
So how did the families and the kids do through all this?
The saying that kids are resilient, I think, has just been proven 100-fold by this set of circumstances. They were tremendous. They kind of took everything in stride. They kind of got almost excited when we had to move locations for sleeping, and it was kind of like going to camp, and they really maintained a very positive attitude. And even the families, I think the difference with this situation was the entire state. So, we were talking to families who didn't have power and water at home. So I think they were appreciative of the communication, but also understanding that it was just a really unique set of circumstances with a ton of challenges that we were doing our best to get through.
Right. What would you say are some of the big costs for Clarity of this experience, or the challenges that brought?
And do you mean financial costs?
Among others, yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely financial is probably a part of it.
Well, I would think the biggest thing I would categorize as a cost is we'd had 2 employees that were injured through the course of this due to a slip on ice, which we really were devastated about. We really tried to stay ahead of the salting, but it just kept going and going. So I think it was Tuesday into Wednesday when we had some other ice fall. We did have one employee fall and break his arm, and another sustained a concussion. So we were able to get them out for emergency medical treatment at that time. But that's a huge cost. You never want anybody to be injured, especially when they're here trying to take care of the kids. So that was definitely number one. The financial repercussions in the cleanup are real and are going to have a lasting impact. The damage to that main water line, which we have Saturday we got back up with a temporary fix. It should be permanently fixed today. That will run quite a bit. And then we had on Sunday, when everything really started to thaw out, discovered we had a burst pipe on the other side of campus. Sorry, my light turned off.
No, that's right.
So that had to get repaired. And then we have a satellite clinic that's been closed because of the pandemic. We lost a backflow valve there as well. So considerable plumbing repair and expenses. The other thing, which we don't know the full scope of yet, when you have those rolling power outages, it can create a power surge situation, which can be very damaging to electronic equipment. So we've lost a few phones. We have badge readers here to get in and out of doors. We've lost about 10 of those. Some of our network switches that connect our phones and computers to the system have failed. So there's going to be some significant recovery costs from that as well. And then, we are a nonprofit, but a lot of our revenue is based on patients being admitted to the hospital and insurance payments for that. So we've got quite a bit of lost revenue because of the stopping of admissions that will have an impact as well. And the lost outpatient appointments.
Yeah. So it's a lot of, and I don't know, at this point it's too early to say if there's going to be some state or federal help for those, but we hope that comes in, because it's very significant cost.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, looking at the bright side, what highlights, what do comes to mind when you think back about this experience? Where would be the bright side of that, if there was a?
The number of our staff, the phrase I use, that ran through brick walls. I mean, they showed up every day. Some staff stayed here for 4 or 5 days in a row to make sure the kids were taken care of. We're really working on the way to do thank yous this week for the staff that went above and beyond. But I was just so impressed and so proud to be a member of the team, just seeing the dedication. And I think the reason the kids did so well is because the staff did so well. They set the tone, and they made the kids feel safe and just let them know we were going to get on the other side of this. And I was blown away by that, the attitudes and the positivity. There were some not nice moments. I mean, the toilets were out, and we had to get creative with using the pool water to flush it. And we did not have a single staff that was here that complained about that or said, I'm not going to do that. It really was we're kind of all in this together. These circumstances are out of our control. How can we create the best possible experience for ourselves and the kids? So that, I think, really was a positive. And the fact that we kept everybody safe, the exception of our staff injuries, the kids were safe, the kids were warm, the kids were fed, which I do consider a success based on all the circumstances.
Well, that says a lot about the culture that we have here, and that you're instilling too, in being hands-on and staying, pushing through when things are hard. That's really good to hear. What about, if you could say in closing, what would you say are 2 or 3 strategies to remember for all families, staff, supporters, thinking about this type of circumstances?
And we're still in the process of doing our lesson learned review this week, as we're still in cleanup mode. but I think, being as prepared as possible. I'm very glad we had that meeting the Friday before to kind of outline what our plan was going to be. So that way on Sunday, nobody was surprised. I think being very communicative, and I think this is true for our business, for our family, letting everybody know what the expectations are, what the timeline is, what the loss is. So we tried to, as soon as the water went out, we tried to round on every unit and get right in front of staff and explain what was going on and what steps we were taking to try and fix it. So being over communicative. And then I think, my role in this, which was a little bit different, we had our director of nursing and our COO were really making sure the day-to-day operations were still functioning, that we had enough people. I think somebody in a family also has to think ahead, looking 2 or 3 days ahead and kind of playing out the worst case scenario. What if our power doesn't come back on? What would we do? And I think having as many contingency plans as possible and being prepared for those, like the water situation, looking at that and saying, okay, who do we know? What can we do to get ahead of that water situation? I think you need to have somebody in that role so you're able to be a little more proactive than reactive.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of be able to see what could happen and have options and then the other. I mean, I like the the communication part, being proactive and understanding what maybe the parents were going through and kind of communicating and so that I think that that is very helpful. Well, thank you so much. I think thank you for leading us through this, first of all, and really a very impressive leadership example that you've set for Clarity, and we're really grateful for that. And thank you for taking this time to speak about it. So appreciate you, and we'll have our next webinar. We will start again next week. So I look forward to seeing our audience again next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard.